much which was materially representative of Tatar Islamic culture, its mosques, its graveyards and its libraries, was destroyed. Throughout this difficult time, the Tatar mosque in far distant New York City was seen as the sole reassuring beacon of their faith by Baltic Muslims. The mosque serving its Tatar population today is the oldest functioning place of Islamic worship in the Baltic region. Its mosque, built in 1909, was used as a storehouse for arms and ammunition during the Soviet era and is the most ornate of all surviving Baltic Tatar mosques. Lipka Tatars traditionally did not call the azan from on high, a custom already reflected in the 16th century Risale-i Tatar ile. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. This is the second in a series of videos dedicated to the Baltic Tatar communities of Poland, Belarusia and Lithuania. The situation changed dramatically as a consequence of World War II. As a result of the shifting of Poland's eastern border, most Tatar settlements remained within the Baltic territories annexed by the Soviet Union. In accordance with the Soviet administration's anti-religious ideology, much which was materially representative of Tatar Islamic culture, its mosques, its graveyards and its libraries, was destroyed. The mosque at Kaunas, which was the seat of the Mufti, became used as a circus. In the absence of forbidden religious leadership, it was up to mothers to teach their children about their Islamic faith. Throughout this difficult time, the Tatar mosque in far distant New York City was seen as the sole reassuring beacon of their faith by Baltic Muslims. By the time of the independence of the Baltic states being restored in the early 1990s, the Islamic faith community had survived, but most of its traditional wooden mosques had not. Lithuania now has just 3 historical mosques in the villages of Ekaturia Desimt, Tatorio, Rai and Nemezis, Poland too, in the villages of Kruzniani and Bohoniki, and Belarus too, in the villages of Novohuduk and Iwie, all communities relatively close to one another. In Lithuania, the Muslim community of Katuria Desimt, Tatorio, which means town of the 40 Tatars, near Vilnius, was mentioned for the first time in 1558. The mosque serving its Tatar population today is the oldest functioning place of Islamic worship in the Baltic region, and its cemetery contains the oldest identifiable Lipka Tatar grave. That of Alakberdi who was buried there in about 1621. Its streets are laid out like an ancient Tatar military encampment. Nearby Rai is an important centre for Lithuanian Tatar festivities. It was founded in the 15th century and a mosque was reported there in 1556. The current mosque, which was the only one permitted to function throughout the Soviet period, is of later construction. Inside is a rare Tatar wooden minbar dating from 1684, formerly in the village of Bohoro. Also nearby is the village of Nemesis. Its mosque, built in 1909, was used as a storehouse for arms and ammunition during the Soviet era and is the most ornate of all surviving Baltic Tatar mosques. A mosque has stood there since the 17th century. In rural northeastern Poland, just across the border, the interiors of both the mosques of Kruzniani and Bohoniki continue to display their original construction, whereas most of the other Baltic mosques have been covered internally with later woodwork panelling and window framing. Each structure has men's and women's prayer rooms with high ceilings and a gallery separated by a wall. The Mosque of Kruzniani has a rectangular plan with 2 square towers at its northern end and was likely built in the late 18th century, though refurbished in the 19th century. It has recently been restored. The current Mosque of Bohoniki, with its square plan and high cupola, was built in the 19th century, although a mosque is recorded there as early as 1717. Both buildings lack minarets. Lipka Tatars traditionally did not call the azan from on high, a custom already reflected in the 16th century Risale Itata Ile, as we have seen. However, one of the two surviving wooden mosques in Belarus, that of Iwia, built in the 18th or 19th century, is unique in having a minaret at the peak of its roof, instead of the lantern which was a common feature of Baltic wooden mosques. This village was founded in the 16th century. The Mosque of Novahudrak was the largest in the region, becoming a residential building during the Soviet period. It also had a minaret, which was however destroyed. The mosque was reopened in 1997. Following the restoration of independence to the Baltic states, these 7 surviving mosques became foci of Lipka Muslim religious observance, festivities and culture, although today's Lipka Tatar population represents only a minute percentage of the overall populations of Lithuania, Poland and Belarus. Today these places of worship are respected and visited as important components of the Baltic cultural heritage as a whole. In particular, they are perceived as important symbols of religious tolerance towards all faiths manifested by the Grand Duchy of Lithuania over 6 centuries ago, when religious strife was rampant in other parts of Europe, and to which ideals the modern Baltic states continue to aspire. In conclusion, perhaps the most poignant symbol of the ecumenical coexistence of which the region was capable is a lone, tall, Ottoman-style masonry minaret still standing in the Lithuanian town of Kėdainiai, the sole relic of a mosque built there in 1880 by a local Russian Imperial Army general, Eduard Totlisau, for his beloved Turkish wife to pray in. A plaque at the base of the minaret bears an inscription in Arabic from the Quran. Who is it that can intercede with him except by his permission? The Muslim communities of the Baltic states are not isolated in any way from their brothers in religion in other parts of the world. There's a world Tatar community that is in regular and close communication. Today there are 2 muftis in the Baltic states who regularly communicate with their fellow leaders of Islamic communities in the Caucasus and in Turkey and elsewhere in the Islamic world. Thus they are perpetuating this link that has kept the Baltic Muslim community in the minds of other Muslims worldwide, just as during the Soviet period the Baltic Tatar communities in the mosque in Brooklyn in New York were able to maintain a sense of community and identity with Tatars who were living under an atheist regime. This altogether is a wonderful lesson that Islam is a religion that brings people together and preserves the unity of peoples in peace across the whole world. In a period of misunderstanding across the region, there are really important lessons, I think, for all of us here, in that through Islam we have a mechanism to maintain a sense of brotherliness and acknowledgement of each other, which is only given through the Islamic faith. In our next video, we will be talking about the first mosques that were built in the northern half of America, in the United States and in Canada. And as we stated just earlier in this series of videos, the model for a continuance of the Islamic faith through mosques in North America was provided by the Baltic Tatars and their community in New York City.